welcome wonderful viewers on Better Future Production TV channel. We are at Dula Dima residence at Brufut Heights. Today on this new political show, the show will actually feature politicians and decision makers in shaping our young democratic system. Here on this show, I have two erudite gentlemen, Malik Jones and Mr. Mamadou Fati. Mr. Jones is a renowned broadcaster and veteran journalist. Malik has been working in the media landscape spanning many decades. Mr. Fati, at my opposite right, is the head of admin at Better Future Production. Gentlemen, welcome to this political show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I begin with you at my immediate left, Mr. Malik Jones. The topic we're going to highlight on is the state of the democratic dispensation in the country. First and foremost, what's your take on the current state of the country's democratic dispensation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for the invitation, and I'm glad to be part of this discussion, which centers on the state of the democratic dispensation. But before we delve into the present situation, we need to reflect back as to what ushered in the new dispensation. You will recall that the present status quo was preceded by a 22-year-long government headed by former President Yahya Jammeh, who many have termed as a dictator, autocratic, and has committed crimes against the people of this country that warranted his removal through the ballot box in 2016. But he himself was preceded by the first president of the First Republic, Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara, who also just before he was overthrown saw a party that he led that was becoming divisive, especially after his announcement in 1992 that he was going to relinquish power and look for a successor. I think a lot of people did not want him to do that. It was the self-perpetuation that it was only Sir Dawda that can take this country forward, and that there was no other person who can succeed him and take this country forward. And now that brought about a division within the ranks of the PPP and brought in what they call the Tariq Kafo, wherein you have some people who were pushing for Sir Dawda's replacement either through the ballot box or otherwise. And believe it or not, there were key players who collided or worked along the junta of 1994 that led to the coup d'etat of Sir Dawda in 1994. Having said that, the President Jammeh rule was seen as very autocratic by a lot of people, and but one thing was certain was that there was security and peace coupled with some developments that took the Gambia from where it was before the advent of the new dispensation. However, because of the fact that his rule was autocratic and dictatorial, and there were arbitrary arrests of journalists and different people in all walks of life, this has angered a lot of people, and it reached a crescendo when people marched on the streets of the Greater Banjul area demanding for political reforms. Arrests were made, and subsequently one of the key leaders of that protest died whilst in detention. And this culminated in more agitation. The leader of the United Democratic Party was sent to jail, and eventually parties came together and formed a coalition in 2016 to make sure that the Jammeh administration is out of this country. There should not be any further APRC-led government under the leadership of President Jammeh. And eventually, when we went to the polls in December 1st of 2017, President Adama Barrow, the leader of the coalition, ultimately won by a margin of 19,221 votes. And Jammeh was defeated. He accepted defeat, but we must be able to say events as they happen. Actually, Jammeh did call Barrow and congratulated him. But then, after that, we started to hear the chairman of the IEC saying that there were some mistakes in the interpolations of the results affecting certain areas. Now this, to Jammeh and to any other ordinary person that must have contested, if I have already succumbed to declaring that somebody else has won, and the referee of the race come and say that I have made mistakes, inevitably you are bound to raise concern. Well, this concern that was raised by Jammeh did not go well. He wanted a rerun of the elections. The international community will not have it. Other stakeholders who have vested interest in the Gambia also did not want it. And thereby an impasse followed all that. And eventually, Jammeh had to leave when ECOWAS, the United Nations, and the African Union formed a pact, and the intervention of ECOWAS came in. But we must look at whose interest was it for Jammeh to leave. Okay, politics is politics. It was bipartisan. The APRC and some people who voted for Jammeh would have loved to see Jammeh in. Others who did not want Jammeh in would have necessarily wanted to see Jammeh in. Gambia was a thorn in the side of Senegal, especially with the issue of the Casamance situation. And definitely the then chairman of ECOWAS, who was no other person than Macky Sall, was also very, very adamant to make sure that Jammeh left so that the issue of Casamance will be put to bed once and for all. And as we see, this is the situation. If you go to the Fonies, a good chunk of the economic forces there are Senegalese who are monitoring the Casamance area. Jammeh's gone, the new dispensation has come, and within the new dispensation that we have, there has been some faults within the administration. Dabo was from jail. He was freed from the jail. However, it was done anyway. He got out of jail. He came in, he was appointed. There was a cabinet that was formed by the coalition, then very, very intact. Dabo came, he was appointed as foreign minister for foreign affairs and Gambians abroad. And consequently, we had a female vice president in the person of Fatmata Tambajang. And there were other stakeholders from other parties who also benefited from what was perceived to be an agreement which should make sure that these people all have a stake in the new government. But as time went on, portfolios changed. Dabo became afterwards vice president. And within that instance, there were so many irregularities in terms of appointment. Some people feared that during the time of Dabo being in the office of the foreign affairs, he appointed a lot of UDP members as ambassadors to other countries, and this was did not go well with a lot of other people. Then the situation went on until at one point, whatever must have happened, Dabo was relieved of his position as vice president, along other members of the United Democratic Party. Eventually, There were other stakeholders in the coalition who also lost their ministerial positions. The people like O.J. Jallo, Omar Amadou Jallo, lost his ministerial post. People like Henry Gomez lost his ministerial post, became a youth advisor to the president. And the finance minister also lost his portfolio. He was UDP. And then what we saw was that there were divisive measures taking place in the newfound democracy. There was more partisan division in the new democratic dispensation, which was under the umbrella of a coalition government. I will stop there and we will move on.
Just in short, maybe you've expounded some of the events that unfolded in the build-up to the 2016 presidential election and afterwards. But the government in power, many blame the government for not performing well since its inception to power on issues ranging from youth unemployment that have plummeted and also corruption and so many other plaguing issues. Under your outlook, where did the failure begin?
I think the failure came out clearly because the Gambia was not able to get hold of what the international community promised to give to them in terms of money. The European Union has fell short. Gambia cannot still access the money it was asked to receive. I don't know why. Youth employment becomes a big problem, okay? And we saw, instead of, one thing which I'm not very happy about is that instead of dishing out fishing licenses to the European Union, to Senegal, I think what the government should have done was to engage the international community and say, look, let us capacitize our fishing industry. Let us have fishing trawlers. Let us employ Gambians, teach Gambians. Let us have cold storage. Let us have all the paraphernalia that we need to be able to make sure that the Gambia has a vibrant fishing industry with very good trawlers, train young Gambians to become very good fishermen, have cold storage, and have value added to our fishing products that we will be able to export our fish to the European market. This did not happen. All we did was to give out licenses to the European Union, to the Senegalese, to the Chinese, and you have seen what it has resulted to. Our fishes are being exported with just a very minimal amount of money. There's a fish called it's a high scale value fish. I'll get to the name of this fish very shortly. It's a very precious fish, which has a lot of value. And this fish alone, I mean, if you can do close to about 100 tons of this fish, the amount of money that you get from this fish is tremendous. So I think that we have failed in our promise to cater for the youths of this country. Now look, for example, last time around, there were about close to 1,000 university graduates from the UTG, graduates of the UTG. Where are they going to work? Do we have somewhere to put them? No, we don't. Agriculture. Have we been able to come up with a very good strategy that will improve upon agriculture, employ more people in agriculture, mechanized agriculture? No, we still haven't been able to do that. Yes, there's a youth empowerment project, which they call, but this youth empowerment project continues to train youths on skills that the jobs are not available. So we have a problem there.
Okay. To move on with you, Mr. Fathy, since Barrow came to power, he made a proclaim that he performed better than his former predecessors, Jammeh and Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara. Under his National Development Plan, NDP, What did Barrow register under his developmental strides that his former predecessors could not have achieved?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sedikan. Thank you for having me. Just to delve on before coming to your question, already Mr. Jones have narrated the history that ushered in the current dispensation in our country. I will just go straight, delve straight into some of the success or some of my opinion on the current democratic dispensation. To me, personally, I would say it's ongoing success. It is ODS. It's an ongoing success. Looking at it from different perspectives, from the economy, from education, from health, from youth, youth employment, like you mentioned, the current government have really had success in all those aspects. For example, the finance and the economic sector is a very key sector in the country. You look at in 2018, the economic growth was 4.8, but in 2019 it rose from 4.8 to 6.5, which is a plus. And then, of course, inflation, of course, was also moderated during that period of time. So, which will tell you that there have been so many success efforts that are put in place, by the current government to ensure that the economy is stable. It's a process. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's a process, and then it has so many challenges over it, which if you are not in that position, it will be difficult for you to understand. You look at the agricultural sector, there have been so many initiatives, there have been so many strategies as to make the country food self-sufficiency. The other problem is there, which we will come to that. The reason why the agricultural sector is still unproductive. There have been initiatives, for example, the small ruminant project and then the rice project at Sapo. These are all projects that are capable of creating a good percentage of jobs in the country. So Barrow, when he said he has overperformed than his previous, I would say yes, because if you look at those statistics of growth improvement, you will realize that yes, they have performed. Because you look at the deficit in the current account, it was 1.5, or 1.7 rather. But when they came in around 2019, it declined to 1.5. Which will tell you that he has overperformed them in that section. So I believe when he said that, he is right. So the rest is, I believe, is a collective responsibility.
Okay. So then many youths with anger, with lot of agitation that the president did not perform on his promises during the build-up to the presidential election. We've seen fuel of demonstrations opportunity. We've seen the case of Brikama occupied BAC, Brikama occupied Niste, and then we have seen a lot of protests that were unfolded in the country from the pressure group, the 3 years Jotna movement, to demand the relinquishment for the president to relinquish power. What is your take to that?
If they ask you, if they tell you the president has failed on his promises, ask them what promise the president failed in. What promise? Because all these
to address youth employment.
I'm coming. Not youth employment. Look at this 3 years Jotna people. Their only voice or their only agenda is to the president to resign after 3 years. They have not been talking about the health problems, the challenges in the health problems. They have not been talking about employment. They have not been talking about education or how to change the curriculum. They have not been talking about that. Their agenda is for the president to resign after 3 years. So we will tell you the level of their mindset, and these are people that we expect to be the future leaders of this country. Mm-hmm. I expect them to form up societies, civil society organizations, or I expect them to form themselves into private business citizens and then they approach the government on important projects. But not these are politically motivated movements. If you look at it, you go to the 3 years Jotna protest, you see politicians there, you see executives of political groups we identified. So it's not something that is very surprising.
Okay, thank you very much. We stop there. Malik, next question. Citizens are divided on key issues, most especially on the administrative life of the country. In brief, on your own analysis, what needs to be done by the government to address key demanding issues that are affecting citizens?
I think legislative reforms is paramount. I mean, this is facing the new democracy. We still have the Access to Information Bill, which is still not taken care of. We also have the Anti-Corruption Bill. There's a Women's Amendment of Discrimination Laws. I mean, among them is the Sexual Offense Laws. These have not, of course, come on. The Bill on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters is still pending. There are also amendments to be done to in the Criminal Procedure Code and the criminal code itself. These are all issues that the government is confronted with, and we have the security reform sector. Security reform continues to be eluding the government of the Gambia in its drive in the new democracy. It has not yet been able to come up with anything substantial that you can point out to in terms of reform in the security. You may see a lot of resignations in the security sector. Well, fortunately, I don't know what must have triggered the dismissal of the Chief of Defense Staff very recently, but I'm sure President Barrows did that by looking at certain issues that he is confronted with in the security sector. My good friend here mentioned that, well, okay, there are improvements in the agriculture sector. Oh, okay, probably it's an ongoing process, but the price of commodities keeps skyrocketing. President Barrows' government, when they came in, promised that rice would be around $500. See, now the bag of rice is about 1,000. It's doubled. It's about 1,200 or 1,400 for rice. And onions is on the increase. Fish is, and I mean, a lot of things have gone up, and it cannot be controlled. Government doesn't have a price control mechanism. This would have been one key area that the government of the Gambia in the new dispensation would have won the hearts of many if it was able to put a price control mechanism. That would have been lauded. People would have been happy and would have said, well, fortunately, the president has us in mind, because people are only interested in what they consume, how much money they spend. If I'm spending less amount of money, I am good to go. I am happy. I will applaud the government that is providing that for me. But these are things that are not forthcoming. Unemployment is on the rise, and like I said, these are all big problems.
And then let's take, to cut you short, let's take a paradigm shift and go to our House of Parliament. In your analysis, on your own view, do you think, because the MPs, they influenced bills, that is, pass to ratify bills, they have, a big stake in terms of influencing bills. How do you think that, in your own view, do we have a parliamentarian democracy compared to the former predecessors of the two republics?
Now, the president must be very careful, because he doesn't have parliamentarians on his side. The president came in without a party. He was an independent candidate. And if the opposition, United Democratic Party, which holds the majority in the National Assembly, if they do not like anything that the president puts into the House, they can easily vote against it. Okay? And that is why there is a lot of politicking within the members of the National Assembly, and they have been enticed, okay, with money, with whatever. And sometimes these members of the National Assembly are carried away by these flimsy, mundane things, and they tend to shift their allegiances, attending party meetings, okay, showing some sort of a leniency to the government. And this has happened so much that the United Democratic Party has at one point expelled, I think, 7 or 8 members from its party there. Parliament will not be robust until after the next elections, come 2021, when we will see a very robust parliament, because a lot of parties did not prepare for the 2017 elections simply because they all thought that the elections to the 2017 National Assembly elections was going to be based on a coalition way, just like they had a coalition for the presidential elections. Most of these parties were caught unawares. And Dabo came, the leader of the UDP, came and said, no, no, no. He was going to opt out of the coalition in the 2017 National Assembly election. This caught most political parties unaware. They were not prepared for it. And ultimately, the United Democratic Party won the majority of National Assembly members in the House of in the National Assembly. But come 2021, let's say 2022, because the National Assembly elections will be in the following year. Elections are due in December for the presidential, and National Assembly elections will be in 2022. I think parties will be ready to make sure that they fight a fair, level, fight for, they'll have a fair level fight for the National Assembly.
Okay, the country's political system is getting tenser. In your own look, many allay their growing fears that the country's young democratic system remains inconsistent. Approximately, all party militants unleashing their political verbal cant across different social media platforms. What can be done to make our democracy an ideal one?
Well, I think the Gambia is not yet ready to accommodate 17 political parties. For me, it's just maddening. I mean, 17 political parties for what? It's $17 million into the IEC, who registers them anyway. Okay, there are new political parties that have come into being. Right now we have 14, and I'm made to understand that there will be 3 more, making it 17 political parties. Let us minus Ahmad Ba's NRP, because he's already given way in joining. He hasn't declared it yet. All right, but we understand that Ahmad Ba will subsequently cave in to the National People's Party of President Adama Barrow, who has still yet got to launch his political party and make it. He's registered it, but he hasn't launched it yet. So, in a nutshell, it's going to be so divisive, and it is going to be so chaotic when we want to go into presidential elections in 2021 with something close to 16 political parties. I think we need to scale down. I think the IEC must have got rules and regulations that will simmer down, or that will cut down on the number of parties that want to vie for the presidency.
Mr. Fati, so finally, we are coming to see now multi-parties that are flexing their political party muscles ahead of in preparations of the 2021 elections. Under your analysis, you mentioned that the president performed well in comparison with his former predecessors. What is your ultimate perspective about the president making headways, given the fact that we're going to have a huge multi-party contestant?
Currently, the Gambia, we are not that much politically mature. I can say we do not know who is performing and who is not performing. We cannot differentiate who's working and who's not working. We are simply carried away by personalities, that's 1, 2, by ethnic affiliations or other professional means, but we are not paying attention to the fact on the ground, who's performing.
Do you have any prospect about the president
Just comment, just
to be re-elected?
Yes, of course. If people understand the realities on the ground, of course, he could be re-elected into office. Currently, we don't need those political parties, coming to register to form political parties. Like everyone wants to be a president. That is not possible. You must join hands on deck to develop the country. If you have an agenda and you think your agenda can develop the country, we have government institutions. Try and advance your agenda by means that are provided to you as a responsible citizen. But everyone wants to be a president. And if you look at their manifestos, you read their manifestos, virtually everything is the same. They cannot prove anything beyond reasonable doubts. And in their campaigns, they don't focus on their manifestos, what they can do to change the situation. But instead, they keep on castigating each other, bringing others. That is not the best way to develop this country. That is why the situation, people are saying there is no progress. The government is working, but people are there making noise, and let us make noise. So that is the situation on the ground. People that know the situation on the ground, of course, will elect Barrow.
Okay. And finally, Malik, you made mention of some of the setbacks that the Barrow is confronted with since his inception to power. Do you have any prospect for Barrow to be elected in the State House come next year, 2021?
He has to work very hard if he wants that to happen. It depends on what we see in the Constitution. Do we have 50+1 or just a simple majority? Now, Barrow's party is a new party. And time is really against him. He's not an entrenched party like the United Democratic Party or the APRC or even GDC. These were parties that were around. He may use his incumbency and, stand aloof and try to be one of the heavyweights. But I believe if President Barrow wants to win, he must woo other parties to join him. Barrow alone cannot win elections come 2021. I do not think so.
Which party do you think is nearer to power? And ultimately your final message to our viewers.
We will look at, we will have to revisit Coalition 2016. Now all those...
Is it DOI? Is it UDP?
No, it cannot be DOI. It cannot be DOI. DOI, they are very disappointed with President Barrows, how he has performed. The UDP, no. The UDP is like...
but they claim that they have power.
Who? You mean who's coming next?
Yeah, which party is nearer to power?
Nearer to power. It will be a very tough call.
Do you think it's DOI or UDP?
No, it cannot be DOI. It cannot be DOI. It cannot be DOI. It's between the UDP and the APRC.
Between UDP and APRC?
It will be between the UDP and APRC. And if President Barrow wants to regain or wants to win, he must try to woo the APRC. And I had it in the grapevine that this...
Do you think that DOI have their lapses, their political lapses?
Yes, DOI is more centered in Serekunda and where Sidia Jata, Wuli East. Is it Wuli East? Yes, Wuli East. You see, they have not been able to sell their ideology to reach the grassroots. Their performance over the years, since in the First Republic, has not been anything to give them the leadership.
But their political philosophy is based on education.
Yes, it is.
Education to educate the citizenry.
It is. But who is education?
About their rights and responsibilities, so that power belongs to them.
Yes, power doesn't belong to them. Power belongs to the people. Okay? But you should understand the dynamics of Gambian politics. Gambian politics is not you coming to sell me an ideology. Gambian politics is, what can you do for me? This is it. It's so sad. It's so sad. But this has been...
And finally, Mr. Fari?
That's what I mentioned.
What is your prospect? Which party is nearer to power, to wrap it up?
Before 2021, I'm sure minds will be reflected, on what is good for the country. I believe if you look at the dimension, civil society campaigns, on what is best for the country, I believe they will choose the right candidate. And then the battle will be Barrow, Doi, and GDC.
You have any prospect in Doi?
Yes, I do. I do have prospect with them because they believe in the socialism model, which of course, give equal access, to citizens, in matters regarding their country. So I have hope in them.
Yeah, but you must look at their performance in elections all along. I mean, we must be able to analyze this factually. Doi has never passed 5% of the votes. Never in the history of elections has Doi ever surpassed 5% of the votes.
Meaning their failure lies that they have to change their policies.
Yeah, I think so.
Changing their policy means going to adopt another party's mechanism of politics, which is not, he just mentioned that is what you can do for me. It is not right for a country like Gambia to develop. If you want to emerge from a third world country to a first world country, you must throw that away. Because in the end, instead of going to have technocrats going to bring very important initiative to government institutions, we'll have Terry Cafos, we'll have a district committee that will be going to visit the mayor, going to visit President Barrows in State House. That time that they are using to be discussing those political issues, self-interestness, could be used to discuss some important initiative in the country, decentralize, developments across the country, so we can develop.
Okay, and then thank you to gentlemen, Mr. Jones and Mr. Fathy, on our today's political show. The topic was the state of the country's democratic dispensation. You can join us next week. I am your host, Sirif Sirikan. We are at Dula Dima resident here at Brufut Heights. You can join us next week for your subsequent political shows.